council meeting, and I think we're all still feeling a little rattled by the vigor of that gavel. All right, Megan, are we on? We're good, ready to start. So just push your mic to talk. So turn that red light.
Only 4 at a time, right?
Only 4 at a time.
Yeah, okay. Are we good? I call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. This meeting is being held in person. The public is invited to watch live on the city's YouTube channel, which is Comcast Channel 30 in the city limits, or via Zoom using the link on the meeting webpage. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during the community comment time and during the public hearing. Written comments may be submitted by email to finance@milwaukieoregon.gov. When it is time to take public comments, staff will monitor the comment calls and email inbox. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation services at least 48 hours before the meeting. Translation services are also available in other languages. We'll begin with introductions, starting with me, Leslie Schachner, Budget Committee Chair, and moving to my right.
Hi, Robert Massey, City Council President.
And just remember to turn your mic on when you talk.
You think I'd never done this before? Robert Massey, City Council President.
William Johnson, Citizen Member. Shane Abma, Milwaukee City Councilor.
Mary Rose, Citizen Member, and happy Independent Bookstore Day.
Emma Sagor, Acting City Manager.
Michael Osborne, Finance Director.
David Cheatzazan, City Member.
Sophie Sherman-Burton, Citizen Member.
That's what I meant to say.
Adam Kasserbody, City Councilor.
Thank you. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the minutes for the meeting on February 12th, 2024? I'm hearing nothing. So if there are no comments or edits, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the February 12th, 2024 Budget Committee meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the February 12th Budget Committee meeting.
A second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the February 12th, 2024 budget meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. So at this time, we will open the meeting to any community members that would like to discuss any city business other than the city budget with the committee. The city budget will have a separate public hearing for those wishing to speak to the committee. Those wishing to speak that are not at City Hall, please email finance@milwaukieoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom by dialing *9 to raise your hand. You can also write a comment in the Zoom chat to indicate that you would like to speak. Before you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you would like the city to follow up with you, please submit your contact information to finance@milwaukieoregon.gov. As the committee has other business items on the agenda this morning, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during community comments may be new, staff will respond at the next committee meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Are there any members of the community that wish to speak?
There's no one on Zoom. and
There's no one,
here.
no, okay.
No email.
So in that case, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the quarterly report on the current budget.
Good
Mike?
morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here on a Saturday. I was going to go through the quarterly pretty quick and just go, if anybody had any general questions, you should have all received it a week ago Friday. I know David and Leslie sent in a couple questions, but I was going to remind everyone that the revenues in the general fund look healthy through the third quarter. But remember that we've received all of the property tax, which is the abundance of our revenues in quarters 2 and 3. So in quarter 4, there's going to be a significant eat into the expenses, which is going to eat into that fund balance. If there's any other questions or anything anybody had to care to bring before the group, now is the time to ask. If not, we were going to kind of move forward to the budget document itself. Shane?
Yeah, I had a question, and this is just for my own edification. There's a note in there about the transfer of the library fund, the library into the general fund. I wasn't aware of that, and so could you just tell me what that was about and why?
The library fund was its own fund before. I'm not entirely sure of why it was, but I think for housekeeping purposes, we brought it into the general fund with all the other departments. And so we did that in the last biennium, and this is the first time it's into the general fund. I can look and see why we did that, but that was a call made a couple of years ago.
Okay, I was just curious. So it's not because of you're not aware of any particular event that triggered that. It was just, this is a better place to have it in the general fund. Why
It's
do we
a
even
better
have a
place.
library
All
fund?
of the other departments were in the general
Yeah.
fund. And we just wanted to bring the library fund into the general with everybody else.
Got it. Thank you.
It made more sense.
My recollection is that was a long-standing discussion about bringing it into the general fund so that it was not treated differently. There were at one point issues about whether or not they were getting the same treatment as the other. And for Milwaukie, we have always put a lot of general fund money into our library, which other county libraries have not done. So I think in terms of just accounting, it was cleaner. Yeah. That's my recollection.
I have a note here. It was to track money donated for the library renovations. So it wouldn't be separated. It would all be in one bucket.
I think they were separated during that renovation process so that those donations wouldn't be commingled with general funds. Now that renovation is complete, everything Leslie just said about the administration of moving it back in was a kind of longstanding discussion and plan.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. I guess I call to order the public hearing on the proposed biennium budget for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. The purpose of this hearing is to hear the staff reports and take public comment on the proposed action. Does any member of the committee wish to announce any actual or potential conflicts of interest? Okay, hearing none. We will now hear from Emma Sagor, Acting City Manager and Budget Officer for the City of Milwaukie.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, Council President, City Councilors, Budget Committee, and Milwaukie community members. My name is Emma Sagor. I'm the Acting City Manager, and I'm very pleased to open today's budget hearing and kick off discussion on the draft proposed budget for the 2025-2026 biennium. Before I dive into all the juicy good stuff, I first want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that's gone into preparing the document in front of you. Particularly by our wonderful finance team, Michael, Judy, Kelly, Maddie, Taylor, and Joyce. Putting together a 2-year budget is a major analytic, strategic, administrative, and technical lift. This team was here late last night, in fact, putting the finishing touches on these binders and making sure that this proposed budget is comprehensive and solid. They also did this over the last 6 months while being down a finance director until Michael assumed that position. So they've been short-staffed and still, I think, just produced a really tremendous document. So thank you and lots of gratitude to that team. So to set the stage and the scene for this budget, I want to first look back over the last 2 budget cycles. And when we do this, there's a really significant theme that stood out to me over the last 4 years since 2020, and that is the theme of change. That change includes some really great, exciting, and anticipated things that had been decades of investment and planning in the making. That includes the opening of a new city hall and the sale of our historic city hall building. That includes the opening of a beautiful new library. It includes millions of dollars of infrastructure investment across our city, including through the Safe Access for Everyone program. And it includes some really exciting economic development milestones in our community, including the recent opening of a New Season supermarket. Alongside those really great changes, we've also experienced a lot of challenging and in some cases unanticipated changes that have really strained or challenged city services. That includes, climate change and climate disasters. I feel like we're seeing now almost an annual occurrence of ice, smoke, wind storms that lead to infrastructure and maintenance and safety concerns for our community. We also, looking back since 2020, would be remiss not to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact that is still having and how that radically changed how the city needed to work, to function, to support our community and make sure we stay safe and healthy. And against both of those challenges, we've also seen a troubling rise in behavioral health crises and the houselessness crisis in our community, which has an impact again across all of our city services. And then the third kind of change, which is particularly front of mind given the last couple months in the city, is sort of the inevitable changes that come with any organization, particularly an organization like Milwaukie that attracts wonderful talent. We've said goodbye to our wonderful police chief, Luke Straight, who retired. Our city manager for the last 7.5 years, Ann Ober, recently took a new opportunity in Washington County. And these kinds of changes, while again, they're inevitable, they happen, we have to be prepared for them, they do still have an organizational impact and are something we all grapple with at all levels of the organization. I'll note that our executive team right now at the city, more than half of us have been here less than 3 years. So it's a new team. It's a very dedicated and committed team, but it is a new team. So all of those changes combined do have an impact on our financial landscape, and a pretty considerable one when you look comparing this biennium to the previous one. One of the most significant financial changes is in the last biennium budget, we were still receiving significant injections of support from the federal government through CARES and ARPA COVID relief programs. Most of those funds or those programs are sunset. So in this budget, you see the end of a lot of that one-time pandemic relief assistance. The other thing that's happened over the biennium is we're doing a good job spending down funds that were earmarked for specific services, which is great. We are closing our City Hall fund because we're now sitting in a beautiful new City Hall. We are, I think it's 87% through the second tranche of debt to fund our SAFE program. Again, because we're making great progress delivering these project lists. But when we do that, that does have an impact then on our bottom line balances as those earmarked funds spend down. All of that is happening, and I know this is no surprise to anyone, amidst a backdrop of inflation and the rising price tag of just doing business. And that's both because the cost of the materials and the services are higher, but it's also, given some of those changes I talked about on the last slide, the demand for services is going up and is new and is different. I think about our police department and the behavioral health services that they are providing now that really weren't on their radar back prior to the last 2 biennia. And the punchline of all of these impacts to our financial landscape combined is that our general fund revenues are not keeping pace with expenditures. And we wanted to put together a graph to illustrate what I mean by that. So this takes us back to fiscal year 17, and it's comparing general fund revenues and expenses. So you see, our expenses are going up at a pretty sustained clip. You do see some impacts of inflation there, but I don't see any massive swings of huge, changes in expenditures over this sort of 12-year span. In blue, though, you see our revenue line, and it's largely flat. We are projecting some revenue increases into our forecasted years, but since fiscal year 2017 to today, it's really ridden along that consistent line. And that gap between revenue and expenses is troubling for us. We aren't alone in this predicament. I wanted to share a couple snapshots from the 2024 State of the Cities report that the League of Oregon Cities puts out. So this pie chart is asking, have you seen a change in demand for services? But I was talking about those unexpected or unanticipated changes that are now requiring more from cities. 2/3 have said yes. We're seeing that increase. 32% are saying they've stayed the same. No one has said they've gone down. And then the question was, okay, well, so those increases are going up. How do you feel like you're prepared for that? Is your general fund healthy enough to keep pace? A couple years ago, 61% of cities said yes. Fast forward 2 years, now under half feel that way, and we are in that 49% for sure. And I just wanted to include this quote from a neighbor to the south, the city of Canby, really talking about, how the last 2 years we were able to stay afloat thanks to that injection of ARPA dollars, but we're getting back to this feeling of scraping by and needing to seek out some new sources of revenue. So the overall message I want to convey today is that we really are at an inflection point. Without action in this biennium, in the next 2 years, we are going to face a financial deficit in our general fund in the next biennium. And knowing that we're in that inflection point, we intentionally put this budget together with 3 North Stars in mind, 3 critical objectives. First and foremost, we wanted to stabilize our fiscal foundation. Knowing we're heading into these choppy waters of uncertainty, what actions could we take now to make sure we are as stable as possible in that foundation? While we do that, it was really important to us that we don't go back to basics and lose all the progress this community has made over the last 5 to 10 years on its ambitious vision, policy goals, and the projects and programs that you've invested in over the last 2 biennium. We want to institutionalize that progress so we don't slide backwards, even as we enter some financial constraints. And then the third piece is really using this biennium not to put our head in the sand, but to look ahead, to really get prepared for 2026. How do we advance community priorities strategically in these years so that we're in a better position 2 years from now? I'm going to talk about a little bit of how we've done all 3 of these in the document in front of you. So the first, and I said this is the most important for us, was to stabilize our financial foundation in this biennium. And the number one way we did that was tightened our belt. We had to look at the expenses side. And previous city manager Ann Ober, back in the fall when the departments started to create their budgets, had a really clear message. We need to hold the line. What that meant to us is looking at our materials and services expenditures from the last biennium, wherever possible, we needed to hold that line this budget. While that is not necessarily called a cut, in the context of the inflation we've been experiencing, in a lot of our departments, that feels like a cut. If you're gonna have the same budget you had 2 years ago, you're having to do more with less. There are a few places where that was just truly impossible to hold the line, places where external factors or commitments we'd already made make that impossible, and Michael will talk about that. But on the whole, we've done as much as we can to limit growth in materials and services. Similarly, even while our demands for services grow, we had to make the difficult choice to hold FTE consistent. Rather than increasing positions, you'll see over this biennium, we end up in the same place we've started. We aren't adding any new staff positions. So that's the expense side. We also have to stabilize on the revenue side. And here's what we've done in the budget that's in front of you. So while we have a revenue issue, we also know everyone in our community is experiencing this cost of living pinch. And so it was really critical to us as we went through our fee schedule and thought about the implications of that for our forecast, that we only raised rates where it was absolutely necessary. Across many of our utility funds, which are in a healthier position than our general fund, we didn't have to do significant increases. The average residential city utility bill is due to go up 82 cents a month because of where we've been able to really hold on our water, wastewater, and stormwater. The flip side of that, I mentioned our crisis in our general fund, is that we do feel like we need to find a way in this biennium to stop the bleeding. We need to find ways to increase general fund revenues. And because of a variety of factors and ways where we're constrained in that and other spaces, the mechanism that we are recommending is to do that through the right-of-way license fee. The right-of-way license fee on electric and gas utilities today is 5%. We believe we need to raise that to 8% of gross revenues in this biennium to avoid significant service cuts to public safety, facilities maintenance, and other general funded services. Michael, when he talks to you about numbers, he'll show you the impact of not making that change and why we did put that in the budget you have in front of you. So that's priority one, stabilize. But again, I really want to stress that this team is committed to ensuring the progress we've made to date and our vision and values are still front and center in everything we do. We're pleased to say that this budget, we feel, helps ensure that work on council's current 3 goals of climate, equity, and parks will continue, not only now, but into the future. Throughout the budget document, you're going to see where departments have talked about how things in their budget support the goals. And you'll see little icons like the ones you see on the screen that help you navigate that. But in addition to just sort of the one-off projects or the kind of cool accomplishments that we can say, yes, that supports our equity goal or our climate goal, we really tried to think about ways that we can make these not one-time successes, but ongoing culture changes. So for example, on the equity front, what you see in this budget is funding our equity and inclusion program through this biennium, continuing our staffing at that program and continuing the important work that our equity and inclusion coordinator has started. It continues regular training for our staff and community on important equity topics. And it also, you'll see a reallocation of some funding within our events budget to really be supporting more community multicultural events. On the climate side, similar story. We've kept funding in there for a climate program manager position, as well as the urban forest program. And we're continuing those investments to make sure we're changing our fleet over to be electric and decarbonizing our buildings wherever possible. On the park side of things, this budget includes funding to complete our 3 neighborhood park projects of Bowman, Brave, Balfour, and Scott Parks. And it also funds continued community engagement so that we can further home in on what the city's priorities are around parks and make sure we're advocating for those in the governance space of our parks management. Another way that this budget helps us institutionalize progress is through the application of our new 2024 to 2027 organizational strategic plan, which we cheesily call Milwaukie Momentum. This was a project that was initiated by City Manager Ober to translate the community vision that was adopted in 2017 into an operational roadmap. We've done a lot of work as a community of saying, okay, we have a vision. How does our comp plan get us there? How does our climate action plan get us there? How does our transportation system plan get us there? We hadn't quite done that on how does our 150 people who work for the city of Milwaukee, how do they help get us there? This is the document that describes that strategy. There's 2 ways that I want to share that we used Milwaukie Momentum to inform this budget. The first is through, we created vision, mission, and value statements for the staff. And throughout each department, you'll see performance measures, ways that we're evaluating our success. We've tied those performance measures to our values because we really want to be measuring what matters and making sure that we aren't just saying the words, but we're walking our talk. This is a first step in sort of a bigger effort to revitalize how we use data in the city of Milwaukee to make data-driven decisions. There's more work to come on this, but we think this connection of measures to values is step 1. The second way that we did this was we took the 4 priorities that are in our strategic plan, and alongside those council goals, we used those to help navigate some trade-offs. Again, I mentioned we told departments to hold the line. Sometimes that meant you had to decide, am I gonna do this consultant contract or this one? Am I gonna move forward on this project or this one? To help them navigate which ones, where to go on those decisions, they use the 4 priorities you see here of support our employees, working smarter together, revitalizing Milwaukee, and helping Milwaukeeans most in need. And because we love icons, there's even more icons in your budget document that will show you where those came into place. The third objective we had is in this budget is to not bury our heads in the sand for the next 2 years, is to really be upfront and transparent about what we need to do starting July 1 to get us into a more solid and solvent place financially by the next biennium. And we've kind of got a multi-pronged strategy that we are advocating for to do that. Starts with council goals. So as I mentioned, we've used this budget to institutionalize the progress on our current council goals. We will have a new member of council seated in a few months. And at the end of this year or beginning of next, it's when council is due to review those goals and say, are these still the 3 goals we want to focus on, or are there others we want to prioritize? The setting of those goals is critical so that as we develop future-looking strategies, we know what we're trying to fund. We know what the priorities are that we're really trying to advance. The second piece you're going to see happen over this biennium is some concerted community engagement on our capital investment priorities. It's been about 10 years since we had a robust conversation with the community about their infrastructure priorities. What you've seen in that time is a really big focus on transportation, which is great. We want to know, though, what the values or the things that keep people up at night are now, so that when we're making our future CIPs, we're making those with the latest and greatest understanding of community priorities. So that engagement will kick off this summer. And by the time we're in budget season again in 2 years, we'll have a really refreshed sense of what those capital and priorities are. The third, and I think probably most vital piece of this, is to develop that long-term revenue stabilization plan. So that's going to look like working with council and the community to understand what our revenue tools in the toolbox are, which are palatable, which aren't, what the strategy is to move those forward. But it also means looking at the cost side still, curbing costs wherever we can. We've started a conversation with City Council about, for example, credit card fees. We are spending a lot of money in our budget processing credit and debit card transactions. Is there a way that we could lower that to put us in a more financially stable position? That's all part of this sort of long-term revenue strategy. Another question that's going to be in front of Budget Committee and in front of Council over the coming 2 years is how we want to finance future infrastructure. The last 4 years have seen more debt financing than the city has been used to. And it's a question on if we want to continue that model of taking out debt to fund infrastructure projects or do sort of a pay-as-you-go model. And there's pros and cons to both, and we would want to explore that with you. The second to last piece I want to mention is, and what we're excited for you to hear about and read about in the budget, is we're finally poised to start making some real investments in our urban renewal area. We've accrued enough increment financing there, and that opens a significant amount of opportunity for our town. So you'll see in this budget that the next 2 years we'll start that, and we want that to continue, that significant investment of urban renewal funds, particularly while our general fund is hurting. The final piece of this strategy is that we really want the city of Milwaukee to remain an employer of choice, to remain a place that people want to come and work, people with great talent, and they want to stay here. We're in the middle of negotiations with our 2 labor unions right now, and our goal as staff and as managers is just to continue to make this a place that people want to put down roots and provide their expertise and talent to serve the 22,000 people who call Milwaukee home. So that's kind of the conclusion of my message. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk to you about the specific numbers, but just to kind of chart that road in front of you, Today, it's really that top line message. It's really looking at that forecast. It's making sure you have a good sense of where we are and how to read the document in front of you. Next Saturday, you get to spend a lot of time in this room with us and all of our department heads going budget by budget and hearing from them how they navigated trade-offs, what's in their budget and why. We are holding that third meeting for if we need additional deliberation. That's up to you and us, but we'll see if we need that when we get to the end of next week's meeting. Council is due to adopt the budget on June 4th. And we will, throughout the next biennium, continue doing those quarterly budget reviews that we've been doing for forever now. But I did want to mention that, I feel like I've told a story of a little unsettledness, right? That the sands are they're moving a lot. There's some things that we're a little concerned about. There's some things that we're going to be testing to see how they come up. There's some unknowns. I mentioned the labor negotiations, for example. We, as staff, want to make a commitment that in addition to those quarterly budget reviews, we will also use those as a time to align and anchor any supplemental adjustments or changes we need to with this budget. Supplemental budgets, so historically in Milwaukie, kind of come in an ad hoc fashion. We think that doing this quarterly review and quarterly cleanup will make sure we're keeping the budget as sturdy and strong as we move through these choppy waters and avoid any surprises down the road. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael and just thank you very much for your time.
Good morning again, everyone. Today is somewhat of a relief for me because I've been here the last couple months on Saturdays putting together this document, which I think is a great document that accurately reflects the city's next 2 years in the budget. We do have a challenge going forward, but I think that we're addressing it in this budget. So we're addressing it now so that in the future we can make the right decisions to correct. Kind of the budget at a glance. Here I'm here to talk about the numbers. But the total citywide budget is $192 million. As Emma said, we kept the FTE count at 149 and a quarter. It does go up 1 in fiscal year 25, I believe for a water technician. But in 2026 goes down as the parks director, that position falls off. So we kept FTEs at the same. The hold the line, I'll talk about in a minute we held the line in M&S for all the departments. There are some things in the environment that we can't control, that costs are rising, inflation's rising, and those are things that we have to absorb just like everybody else. Personnel and services cost, we were consistent with years past in how we budgeted number increases. It's difficult because we are going through contract negotiations, so those numbers are in flux. And from a budget standpoint, it's difficult to predict, but we've accounted for it in the budget. And debt service, we've held flat. We're not expecting to, in this budget, we're not expecting to take out any new debt in the biennium. So that's the budget message as a whole. The 5-year general forecast, you can see up here. With the old way, our right-of-way license fees were held at 5%. The city has, there's a revenue challenge that we're here to talk about. And you can see as you're going through this, in the telecoms specifically, the revenues are decreasing. Because of the Comcast court case, we're not receiving Comcast revenues like we did in the past. And that really eats into the city's revenues. In order to offset that, we're proposing the 8% increase in the right-of-way fees, specifically for the PGE and the Northwest Natural. What that buys us is an extra year. If you see on the left side of the graph, with the 5%, we're in the black in years 1 and 2 of the budget, but we go into the red in year 3. By increasing those fees, it biases into the black in year 3 to 2027. So it helps bring a Band-Aid of an extra year to the budget and gives us some flexibility that it's not as tight. It's not hampering us as much. So it buys us the extra year. In this screen, we're showing by department how most of the departments within the city held the line. Specifically, I wanted to point out planning and community development, which slashed their budgets almost $200,000 combined, which to me, being in government accounting for 10 years, I've never seen that before. Laura and Joseph can speak to it next week, but they feel that they can do the work in-house versus going out to consulting more. And that's just one example of how we're trying to tighten our belt and use more of our internal resources than going outside. There are a couple increases to departments that we've highlighted here in yellow. For example, facilities is going up. Just like all of us, our utility fees are going up. The city's getting hit with that as well. Our landscaping contract has gone up 8 to 10%. Future repairs too to city buildings. We have a lot of new city buildings, and some of the aspects that we use in that, the HVAC systems are kind of complicated, and to hire maintenance people to come out for that is expensive. And all those agreements are going up. So we've accounted for that in the budget. IT subscriptions. We have a lot of IT use that we use for all of our functions that we do in our day-to-day work.
Michael, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
In terms of the facilities management going up, how much of that is due to the library's HVAC problems?
We did budget, I believe it's 20 to 25,000 for the maintenance agreement in that. Peter can speak next week to how
Okay.
that's going. I think they have a plan moving forward. I'm just using that as an example of the different contracts that we have for repairing different parts of the city. All those fees are going up.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
This actually, I don't think is in the budget as a specific page. It would be shown throughout each of the department budgets. So yeah, this specific table is not replicated in the binder. Sorry.
We can send this out to you, the presentation, so you can see by a summary of by department level. Going back to IT subscriptions, those are going up almost over 10%. We don't have control over spending in terms of IT subscriptions because everything is so personalized. It's hard for us, like with Adobe, for example, it's hard to shop the market because the things that we've integrated into the city, we use every day. And we're trying the best to get the best rates that we can. One example is we're trying to do 3 and 5 year terms in order to get a cheaper rate yearly to lock us into a price because right now it's such a volatile market that they're expanding. But you see that there is a significant increase of over 100,000 in IT subscriptions. General government, our insurance costs are going up 5% to cover auto and building insurance. We've accounted for that. And the biggest is in police, the 911 radios and the C800 radios, which I think council was heard a couple weeks ago about when the C800 radio people came in and talked about their increase. That's in here too. And for the police to do their job, they need these things. And so we've accounted for it, but that's a huge increase in the M&S that we can't control.
Can I just add something here?
Yeah.
Yeah, for those of you who may not be aware of this C100 radio thing, it was a regional-wide initiative to upgrade the regional radio systems for all of the first responders and the police and everything like that. And to put it bluntly, the program was mismanaged, and so there are a lot of cost overruns. And so we've been handed a bill. Would that be an accurate statement?
And, that was not something that Milwaukee controlled, we participated, would that
That's
be
correct.
fair?
It was a county, program together, all the cities around, the police stations around.
Right,
got
I
together to
think,
do
I
it.
think I remember when it was coming in.
They're hoping to drop the costs in that by selling some of their overstock of equipment. But I don't know the likelihood of that. So when we're budgeting for worst case scenario in that deal. Kind of my philosophy with the budget is I try to be conservative as possible, put as much in here that we can plan for. And I feel it's well represented in this document. Next slide. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question on this. This is just materials and services, so not payroll related?
Correct.
Okay, got
And
it.
it's just general fund too.
Yes, okay, because I just wanted, since the police was the biggest increase, I'm assuming we'll probably see a decrease on the payroll side because of less overtime, since they're at full staff, or?
Yeah.
Or I don't want to get ahead of it, but,
We
if
can
you're gonna
speak
talk
to
about
that
that.
next week,
Oh,
but the
okay.
police is now, I believe, near full staff.
Mhm.
And so their overtime numbers should be decreasing.
Mhm.
In the last budget, we had to do a supplemental
Yeah.
to increase.
It was like
overtime.
300,000 or something.
Overtime
yeah.
numbers are coming down,
Mhm.
and as we bring more people online, those
Mhm.
numbers should continue to go down.
Okay, got it. So that'll be probably addressed next week with all
Yes.
that. Okay, thank you.
Ryan Burdick, Chief Burdick will be here next week.
Sounds good.
That's
Thanks.
So 4 years, well, the last 2 budget cycles, I was in your position, and now I'm on the opposite end of the table. But I kind of wanted to go through a little bit on what this document is and what you'd be looking for as you go through it. First, Kelly Tucker spent a lot of time putting the fine touches on this document, and it really looks good. And she did a great job with the table of contents and the dividers. So it should be an easy document to kind of flip through, go through, make notes on. These are your copies, so feel free to write questions or highlight certain things. The first tab is Emma's budget message. She's setting the tone of the city that you can kind of go through and read. She, in her talk, kind of gave a summary of it, but this is just how the city is looking into the next 2 fiscal years. After that is kind of a city overview of just kind of the background and the history of the city, and it's pretty generic as to years past. So there's nothing much new in there, but if this is your first time through, you can read through a little bit about the city. We also, on the last page, have a budget calendar, which it's the calendar we've tried to follow through our process, which we started in December and January up through May today. Kind of illustrates what we've been doing. The financial policies and trends, this is kind of our philosophies on how we budget and how we account for things in the budget. We're just stating it down on paper, and you guys can read and get kind of an overview of how we accrue for things, how we account for things in the finance. And then next side is, there's also, back here, our financial trends, which we go out, I think we work with the League of Oregon Cities and kind of get a feel for what the region is and what the region is going to and how we can predict population and revenues coming in, how we figure that. And then the next is the budget. That's page
page number.
Oh, sorry, I'm just flipping through tabs, but, yes, that begins on page 49. And then also in the back of that is a detailed list of how the city does transfers. Um, if we want, we can talk later in subsequent meetings about it, but basically the city has, departments that work directly with residents, library, police, those such. And then we have the behind the scenes departments that help support those departments. And that would be finance, that would be HR. The cost from the finance and HR, we distribute back out and transfer to the front facing departments. And this is just a accounting of how we distribute those costs back to within the city. We go now to the budgets tab.
Question before we go forward?
Yeah.
So just for my clarification, here on this, in this whole, policies and trends, just give me a flavor about how this works within the staff. I mean, is this built into software? Is it built into standard operating procedures? I'm just curious.
How do you, I think, if I'm hearing your question correct, it's built into staff. This is stuff that's been institutionalized over the last 10 years. Casey Cammers came on 10 years ago, and she kind of developed this philosophy going forward, which has been handed down through Haley and Bonnie and me. And it's just how we think about how we account for philosophies in it. It's more terminologies on how we choose to budget. I'm not giving a very good description at the moment, but
I'm just trying to understand what the city does to achieve these policies. I mean, is there a how-to book? Is it built into the software that won't let you do something that's against policies? I mean,
We also have, I mean, the biggest thing is we have regulations. We have audits that we go through. We have GFOA that we go through. And they are setting the tones for how we account and how we show for in the budget. Like the level of detail in here is, some of it's set by us, some of it's set by the state and GFOA. And we're just telling the how and the why we do what we do in the budget.
And I would add, Council President, that's absolutely correct. And in terms of how that is mechanized and when this is put together, it is a decently manual process. It's a lot of Excel spreadsheets that have been prepared by directors past and accountants past, refined as we go through the audit process, and then applied by our, tremendous finance team here. I will say, as one of our strategic plan priorities is working smarter together going forward. I think there are opportunities to utilize software to make this a more efficient process and make sure that those that institutional knowledge about trends and policies isn't in a person's head or in a spreadsheet. It's in a system that helps us go forward and in a way that can very transparently show that to the community. That's a value Michael and I share and something we would like to work towards for the next biennium.
yeah, I think that, I have no doubt that best practices have been developed and it becomes tribal knowledge. But, as we have seen, the tribe moves to another location and that kind of thing. And then we just want to make sure that there's no speed bumps as we go through those transitions. And so I think it's important that we have some way, I like your term, mechanized, how we mechanize it. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that.
I see this as an opportunity because there has been so much turnover in the last 2 years. And for me, I'm kind of finance director, assistant finance director, doing 2 jobs at once. And there was a lot of breadcrumbs in this document. Like I refer to the last budget constantly for, hey, how do we account for this? How do we look for this? how do we do it in the past? In accounting, it's a lot of looking back to how you do it and do you want to make changes as you go forward? And our process, this is highly Excel and Word document, unfortunately, but it's a great process that's been set up. But there are ways to improve it that I'd like to look at going forward.
I'd just like to make a comment. I appreciate everything you've said. I think it's really true. But as someone with some history, I can remember when the city did not even have written financial policies. So I just want to say that this is a process that has been developed and is, interestingly enough, due to some of the transitions, the need for formalizing some of that has become, I think, clearer to everybody. But I just do, and I highly recommend the systematizing things, but I do think that the city is in way better shape than it's ever been on these particular things. So we're moving forward.
And I feel like I'm the third evolution of this. It started with
Casey and then
It's
Bonnie.
gone to Bonnie, and now I'm kind of taking it. There are things I'd like to do moving forward, but because of time, we were just trying to get the best document that we can, which I think is reflected here. But I feel like I'm the third evolution of this to take this and bring it forward into the future.
I also think that we have the opportunity as a budget committee, in terms of what you were talking about, our quarterly reports going forward, to evaluate and comment on the development of that over the next biennium. And then I'm done.
All right, moving on into the meat and potatoes of the budget. The next lots of tabs here are all the departments' budgets that you can go through. This is general fund departments and then the separate different utility funds that are in here. Kind of to walk you through just how it's laid out. We have each department, they give a brief narrative on what they do, what their accomplishments have been in the last 2 years, what their priorities are looking forward, any changes to service that they've had recently. We've added performance measures in there so that you guys can see what they've done, what they're doing, and kind of where they're expecting to go in the future. And then the last part is the financial summary of each department. And it's laid out in the top part by personnel services. Then we go into M&S and capital. And just feel free to read through it. As you have questions and things, just feel free to ask me. I did want to go through the general fund highlights a little bit.
Could
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have an ongoing concern with tracking what departments are doing, not just what it costs. And I am looking at just one, for example, there's a list of accomplishments, but there's no comparisons on previous years. And I think it would be useful to be able to have each entity tracking things in a common way, not with each other, but over time. And I recall that we used to have some of that, and I would offer to help do some of that, which I used to do once upon a time, because I think that gives the citizens a sense of what the budget is actually doing. And that may be more accessible than the dollars themselves. So I'm just putting in a plug for trying to do that.
I really appreciate that feedback. I couldn't agree more. I think that the performance measure tables are an initial attempt at some of that.
Uh-huh.
But as I mentioned in my message, we've identified pretty significant cleanup. There's what you can count or what you are counting and what you should be counting, or what tells a story of what connects to those accomplishments.
Well, and one of the really common issues when you start quantifying what people are doing is that people tend to focus on the big new projects when 80% of the money is going towards maintaining our system. And that needs to be included in that kind of accounting.
Absolutely. I would really welcome, as you are reviewing these budgets and preparing for the conversations with department heads next week. You know, if you've got questions or if you're missing something in those performance measure tables, that's really helpful feedback for us. We're doing kind of a whole scale improvement of our performance measurement system over the next biennium. And so the feedback we get from you now would directly inform that. That'd be really helpful.
Thank you.
I did want to focus your attention to page 81. This is the general fund explanation of significant changes. I'd encourage you all to read this page, because this is us telling us the revenue forecasts that we've gone through, the increases and decreases that we've seen throughout the city. I highlight number one, that we're increasing right-of-way fees for PG&E and Northwest Natural to create additional revenue to offset the decrease from the telecoms that we've seen. We kind of just briefly highlight through there what our revenue assumptions are and how we got to them. And feel free to just go through there. And if you have questions through that, ask me. But I just wanted to point you to this page, as I think this kind of sets the tone for the general fund and significant changes we've seen.
Counselor Koster-Abadi.
Yeah, very good. I don't expect that, but my question was actually on my tab here. I know I've asked about this quite a bit. It was the reserves policies that we have. It's page 43 in particular. I mean, 42 and 43, because it explains the reserve policies. But I'm curious how we got to some of these numbers. Like the general fund is a 25% balance that we need to maintain above what's there. You got 50% for building fund, 50% for water fund, or 6 months, or 6 months on the building fund too, 25% or 3 months for wastewater. I'm just curious, how did we come up with those percentages?
Those were done through past committee meetings where we've set those reserve rates based on, I believe it would be council and budget committee recommendations.
So is this,
It's
I guess,
the
when was the last
past
time it was
that
looked at?
Say that?
When was the last time we looked at at some of those
I can go
figures?
back and look, but I would imagine it's probably been about 10 years.
Wow.
But we're trying to give ourselves, I look at it and like, we're trying to give ourselves 3 6-month year reserve, that in case we didn't have revenue coming in, that these funds were sufficient during that time frame. And I believe that's how they calculated the percentage that we get to.
Yeah. The reason I really say that is because I know for quite a while we had an excess amount in some of these funds, like for like 7 years, because we were waiting on certain things to happen. So I'm trying to see if these aren't, like state mandated percentages, if maybe we can move them around a little bit to help in certain budget crunch times where.
Something that Peter and I think Jen Garbley will be here next week. In the back of the book is the CIP, and that's all the projects we anticipate to do. And if we are doing those projects, we should be using those funds.
Right.
We don't want to sit on those funds, and in this budget, we're not anticipating we are. We want to do the work for the infrastructure to get those moving.
Right.
We've had a challenge doing that in the past based on a number of factors, but our goal is to do that, and that's why those funds are there so that we can do that work.
Right.
Talking about where we set the percentages and the policies, at some point, I'm sure we can go back and review that, but I believe that were set 10 years ago.
Okay.
And what we can do next week, Counselor, when our department heads are here to kind of talk about their budget, we can make sure that in those presentations, we're clarifying why the reserve was set where it is, and if
Right.
there is a regulation related to it, or if it is negotiable.
Right. I appreciate that. Yeah, because I just look at it like, if we're not tied to a specific project, we're just waiting for the other party to come forward. For example, that was the issue with some of these other projects we were waiting for. I think the railroad or Metro or whoever it was we were waiting for. Like, I don't want to be, being held, those funds being held hostage for 7 years. I mean, I think there should be a limit, right? Because then when you get into these issues, like, it was kind of timing when I first asked about this, and then like 2 weeks later, former city manager Ann Ober was like, "Oh, they're moving forward." So I was like, "Okay, well, so much for that idea." But again, for holding on to funds for extended period of time, maybe we should look at putting some limitations on that. And then what happens when it reaches that? Do we axe the project, or do those funds go back into the, it's just something to, because I know quite a few times over the last few years, we've been over 50%, we've been over 25%, we've been over 17%. So I'm just looking at it, having flexibility in that may provide a little bit of, pressure reduction in certain areas for the budget.
I recognize what you're saying, and from the finance point of view, I always keep that in mind. Like, we shouldn't be sitting on these dollars.
Right.
The hard part is for us to get the moving part, and I know that Peter and Jen try as fast as they can, but it's also hard to actually get moving. We want to do it, we got the money, and then, there's other factors that come up that that make it difficult for them, that make it a
Right.
challenge. So I recognize what you're saying, and I think that we recognize as a city, we just need to get the projects moving faster.
Right, and then that's all it is. It's just at what point do we say, okay, 7 years is, 2 years too many, or 5 too many, or so. And I get the other circumstances, but 7 years is, I just feel like there should be a discussion on a limit. I appreciate it.
I think Shane was next.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question on page 79, which is just the summary sheet. I'm looking at the very last column. I'm assuming when it says proposed total, it's the addition of the two columns prior to that, but in the very first one, I think that should be 22, not 12 million, which then affects the bottom number, which I think should be 75 instead of 65.
So with the top number would be the beginning fund balance. So that one isn't an addition because the fund balance changes based on all the non-bolded numbers from the prior year. So our starting fund balance for example, in 2026, we expect to be at 10 million. So you wouldn't add that to,
Well, when it says proposed total, that's for the 2 years, right?
Correct.
Shouldn't that be 22 million, 12 and 10? No?
because you
No,
would,
because we're saying at the beginning of the biennium, our fund balance is 12 million. And that's what it's saying in the proposed total. You're not adding those two together. You're using the beginning of the biennium.
Okay.
I didn't,
The rest of them are all added though.
yeah.
Everything else is doubled.
Because those are biennium totals.
Okay.
It is confusing. But we want to use the beginning fund balance in the proposed total from the beginning of July 1, 2024.
Okay, so that number is correct. It's
That
12.
number is correct.
Even though everything else there in the columns are all doubled, right? Okay, so
They're all
that is
doubled
confusing for
because
me. Okay.
you're doing a biennium total
Yeah, okay, I see.
But the biennium beginning balance.
Is
Stays the
just,
same.
okay,
It's confusing, but it's correct.
I see.
And it's a good
You just need to
question.
draw a line under that, so it's clear that it's not the same.
We should, take away, never mind, that's. for
Well,
something
when you
else.
go down to the bottom line, you'll see for total resources that starting fund balance is subtracted from the total too.
Robert?
My comment really follows on what Adam was talking about. And, you know, I look at it a little bit differently in that we have, I'm a proponent of having reserves because we need them because periodically, you know, you don't know when the revenue's going to slow down or whatever. But I kind of look at it in the view of not so much on budgeting, but on program execution. And I think it applies to other things than really these broad sort of budget categories. And so I think back to the discussion we had just a few weeks ago on City Council about 29th Avenue. And there was this fund of money I'd never heard of. And it was just kind of sitting there and we hadn't used any of it. We said, oh, we got some of that. And so
What was that fund of money?
It was spot improvement money in our transportation CIP.
Yeah. I'm sure they're not hiding any money from you, Michael, but.
It was $25 million in funds.
But it wasn't insignificant, you know, and that kind of thing. And so I just think that there has to be some way to go back to look at these reserves, or if there's these designated sort of projects, so that we can go back and say, is this correct? Has it been there for 7 years? Or what is this spot money that we're not spending and that kind of thing? So I look at it more from a program execution
Yes.
standpoint than maybe a budgetary standpoint.
Thank you, Council President. And I think that what Michael was saying about this, the realisticness of our CIP kind of gets to the point both of you are making. Take the spot improvements, that's a project or a pot of money that was put in the previous CIP. The reason that didn't move forward was simply a capacity issue. There was no one to set up that program and get it rolling. It was an idea of our previous assistant city manager who took a new opportunity. There's no, I'm not trying to assign any blame there. It's just one of those things where you evaluate, okay, well, this didn't move forward. Why didn't it move forward? How do we fine tune the capital improvement plan so that when we're earmarking funds, we are really confident we can expend those funds?
That kind of, I'm flipping to the back of the book a little bit, but I feel it, now is a good time to bring up the CIP. That's what the budget book closes with. This is the time where we went through and reallocated the funds for what we're going to do in the next biennium and out through 5-year forecast. So by project, you can see Peter and Jen have done a great job of describing the project, what we plan to spend in this biennium, and then what we plan to spend in the next 5 years. And there's a description on each of these projects. So kind of to Adam's point, this is where we're projecting what we're going to spend and use those dollars. And that's a big significant part to close the budget book. Also in here too is there's a brief segment on the Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission. Joseph will be here next week to talk about what their plans are, but they're a separate entity from the city of Milwaukie. So we, next week, we'll have a small separate meeting to address their needs, but they're represented in the budget as well. And I think with that, that's kind of summarizes what this budget book is. I did want to say, I'm one person. I've spent 2 months going through this. I welcome and appreciate all your eyes going through this because I'm not perfect, unfortunately. But I want you guys to go through, read it, ask questions, and if you could all individually email me questions by the end of the day on Wednesday, that would be great. That's going to give us time to compile the questions into a document and come up with the answers that we can then present next Saturday. Do not send an email out to everybody asking the questions because there are meeting rules that Scott enforces. So if you could just send them to me by the end of the day, Wednesday, we can go through, compile them, and address any questions that you have.
And I just wanted to note that you've got your printed binders. This is also now published online. The community has access to the full document as well, and we will accept community comment on the budget all the way up to that May 4th hearing. David?
Yes. Also, thanks everyone for dealing with my 2-year-old. That's the best he's ever been. So be excited. Yeah. 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 That is a outlier. I was expecting this to be much more chaotic. So thank you everyone. But back to what everyone was saying about kind of these finances. I totally understand, and I agree with you. You have to have funds in place because we can't be default on paying a contractor, especially when a lot of these contracting projects take 6 months a year. You have to do an open bidding process. I understand all of that. One thing I wanted to mention is, and I emailed Michael about this, about the Q3 24 budget, was the staff turnover. And I noted that either planning or engineering's down a person, stormwater's down 2 people, another department I think was down. But a lot of this is in that same area of these capital improvements. Is that impacting the rollout of these funds being spent, or is,
Greatly. I
okay,
think 2 members of engineering have left recently, so that impacts Jen and Joseph's opportunity to get this stuff going. I
okay,
know the Washington Street improvements are beginning, but it's the planning that takes months of preparation to do, and
Yeah.
being short-staffed does impact that.
yeah, I gotcha. And so then, in theory, maybe wave a magic wand, priority 1, bringing in the 4 or 5 new people, that would, in theory, really speed up a lot of this process.
It would
seems
help.
like. Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
Mary?
This is actually, getting back to information in the budget message. So, but I was kind of waiting to see how it played out in the rest of the budget because you mentioned the icons were gonna appear, which they have. But in looking at the council goals and then the Milwaukie Momentum goals, the first 2 Milwaukie Momentum goals seem to be about internal culture predominantly, which I'm a firm believer you need that employee engagement to gain efficiencies on your external facing goals. But then it gets into Milwaukie Momentum 3 and 4, and 4 ties into equity, but is not the complete equity picture. And so I guess the budget document is really where a city states what its priorities are. The rest of your stated goals, if they aren't funded, they aren't really the priorities.
Yeah.
And so just, I guess, moving forward as a council looks at goals and we look at Milwaukie Momentum, making sure that those are aligned and we aren't taking on too many things when we're forecasting that we're going to be in the red in 3 years, and what really are the priorities, because it does feel like Milwaukie Momentum's added to council goals in some ways, and then council's going to look again. So just, I guess it's more that caution and request as far as the impact on the budget going forward.
I really appreciate that feedback, Mary. I couldn't agree more. If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. When we started Milwaukie Momentum, we we really started with the community vision statement, the 2017 community vision statement, and then did it was a staff-driven and staff-focused effort to really find out for the employees what gets them up in the morning, what gets them excited to come to work, what makes them want to stay here and build a career here. I think there's a lot in there and in those 4 priorities that speak to that broad vision. I take your point that there's maybe not the clearest alignment then with the current council goals. I think there's, as you read through it, there's elements of sustainability and climate forward action that really work into how we work smarter and manage our resources, how we revitalize our town in a sustainable way. Similar with equity, we've got equity actions across all 4 priorities. But I do think, I take your point that there's sort of some operational priorities, there's some policy priorities, and I think over the next 2 years, getting a little bit on the same page is going to be really critical when the resources are tight. We wanted to make sure that staff strategic plan was an honest reflection of what we're hearing from the folks who show up and work here. And I think there's a little rub there, right? So I really appreciate the question, and it's why sort of that first step on our priority, or there's so many priorities, but the first step on the number 3 of how are we going to use this biennium to get set for the next one, I think is that council goal conversation later this year.
I do have a follow-up, sorry. So in looking at how do you mentioned the goal number 3 and the efficiencies. So I like that each of the departments have put in their performance measures. But maybe when they do their presentation, a little bit about, for some of those measures, how they will use those in making future decisions. Because if we're measuring it, it should be, if we're bothering to measure it, it should be something that is used for making decisions on efficiency or effectiveness. Some of them are more obvious than others.
Yeah.
Thank you.
William?
What happens when a fund balance hits 0?
It's not good.
But functionally, what happens?
There's mechanisms in place so that it doesn't hit that. That's why we have the reserves and the contingencies. If it did hit 0, I'm sure the state would come in and regulate and ask questions why. I don't know the specific answer, but it's something that, essentially that fund would be bankrupt and not be able to be continue work. We don't want to get it to that point, so I just want to be clear that that's why we have the reserves and contingencies. And that's why we're here doing the budget, so that we plan for all these costs. Listening and reading to the C800 experience there, that scares me, and I think it scares them, and they're trying to plan and think of ways so that you don't get there. But I don't have a great question. I think the program ceases to exist.
Okay, so we're done with that now? So now, this is just a notation for the future. The presentations for all departments will commence at the next meeting, which is May 4th, 2024. And as such, the public hearing will need to continue. The meeting on May 4th will begin at 9 a.m., which will be immediately following the Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission Budget Committee hearing. Can I have a motion to continue the public hearing to May 7th, 2024?
Did you say May 4th at one point and then May 7th, or?
Yes.
It should be
If it
May
May
4th.
4th.
May 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to motion to add another meeting.
No, that's good. Here, let me make
So
it.
I'll move that we continue the hearing to the May 4th. Is that fair enough? I don't have the script in front of me, but does that satisfy the motion you need?
And a second?
I second.
Okay,
I did want to point out too that there was a mechanism that if we needed an interpreter or bilingual
they should ask for it
opportunity, you
48
can
hours
ask-
ahead of time.
Yeah, please ask 48
Please.
hours ahead of time and we can have somebody come in here and interpret to, I would assume Spanish, but if it needs to be another language, we could see about doing that as well.
Okay, so that doesn't need to be in the motion though, right?
No.
Can we have a vote on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So just to be clear, anybody that would like translation services on May 4th, please contact finance@milwaukee.oregon.gov and ask for those 48 hours ahead of time. Thank you. Okay. The public hearing on the state revenue sharing is hereby called to order. Does any member of the committee wish to announce any actual or potential conflicts of interest? Seeing none, does any community members in person or on Zoom have any objections to the committee's participation in the meeting? We don't have anybody, right? Okay. The staff will now provide an overview of the state revenue sharing plan presented by Michael.
Hello again. I'm here. I'm here to talk a little bit about the different types of revenue the city receives in the general fund as far as state shared revenue. For fiscal year 23, 24, or excuse me, for the upcoming fiscal year, we anticipate in property tax an increase of roughly 3%. This is a conservative estimate that we take into account the discount for the current economic conditions. Last week, we received the county assessor's forecast, which was about a 3 to 3.5% increase, which was similar to years past. However, there was a 2%. Sorry, I'm reading this and finding that that's not relevant, but it was roughly a 3% increase, which is consistent with years past, considering measures 5 and 50. The city also receives franchise taxes. These include PGE, Northwest Natural, Comcast, which we've seen a decrease in revenue, and we're projecting forward a decrease, along with telecom. Financial or franchise fees also include solid waste rates. We also have PEG dollars, and there's a miscellaneous bucket for small amounts of franchise fees that we receive there. Our intergovernmental revenues, these are the state revenue shares. These are based on state forecast that we receive. We took a conservative path and reduced revenue based on the current economic conditions. We kind of held the line with those. You'll see in the intergovernmental, I just took it and used the same rate going forward. State gas tax is one thing that's definitely in flux that we held the line on that and show no increase just because of the volatility of that. Other grants that are included in here are a metro bond that is projected to receive and use towards park construction.
Sorry, Michael, where are you?
This isn't a page, this is a script that I'm just reading off.
So I think for this, we just have to speak to the state revenue sharing pieces.
Okay, my apologies. For the state revenue sharing,
So it's just cigarette marijuana.
okay. My apologies. So the city receives revenue funds from liquor tax, alarm permit tax, marijuana tax, and state gas tax. those are the impacts that the city's receiving in. I believe that that's all I need to notify.
And a disclosure of no gas tax increases.
And there's no, we're holding the line on state gas tax revenues. My apologies for doing this on the fly.
Question. Question. When you say we're holding the line on gas tax, so Milwaukie has discretion to like increase a local gas tax? Is that what?
I don't believe, that's not what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying that as we're forecasting our revenues, I held the line and then.
Oh, I
didn't
see.
Anticipate
The
any
revenues that we'll get
future
from the
revenues,
state.
correct.
Okay, got
And
it.
I'm using that based on the past fiscal year.
Got it. Okay. And then, sorry, I know we've talked about this before, and apologies. Do you have like a 30-second summary of why the Comcast fees are going down? You said there's a lawsuit. Is that like ongoing? Is it concluded? I forget.
I don't know if it's ongoing, it's with the city of Beaverton, and I'm not sure. if
It's not,
ongoing.
it's not ongoing. It's been concluded.
okay.
And it basically says that cities in Oregon can't charge for data transmission. And we've known that now for over a year.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
The way I interpret it is the Comcasts aren't coming in and putting in fiber lines
Yeah.
into the city. They're doing it more 5G and in the air. So
Okay.
they're contending that they don't have to contribute as much finance
Yeah.
fee or franchise
Yeah,
fees because
got
of
it.
that.
and they won that suit.
And they won.
And,
Yes.
and sorry for the confusion, folks. So this public hearing we're doing right now is specifically about accepting state revenues. So
sorry.
we just have to be careful about what we're discussing during this hearing versus
Sorry,
out of
got
it.
it.
These are all great questions. We'll
Got
just talk
it.
about those in the general general budget hearing.
Got it,
And
sorry.
for this, it's
Okay.
just that overview of the state revenue acceptance piece.
Got it. Thanks.
Have we received any additional correspondence on the state revenue sharing
We've
plan?
got a couple.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, before we go forward, I know that you said that you were reading from a script, but is that broken, are these categories broken down in this document somewhere where it says marijuana, liquor?
They're,
Gas tax.
they're in the general fund and they're in, real quick. They're,
So page 79.
Yes. I saw the overall state revenue sharing. I don't see a breakdown.
there's not a breakdown of it. I can get that to you, but, we have it detailed out. This is just a summary form. I can send you the detail of how I'm calculating that, but, in this budget document. it's just-
Okay. And then to follow up to that, I think the League of Oregon Cities kind of does a forecast, and so you have an idea of where we're going with some of those, but you mentioned that you're holding the gas tax constant. That's just a decision that you've made, or is that based on some data we received, like, you need to hold this constant from all cities, or is that just your conservative
Mostly
approach?
it's me being conservative, but it's a little bit of me reading the tea leaves of other cities it's in flux, I believe, in
Mhm.
Salem. They're
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. I'm sure you heard it before, but as people move to electric cars, that's less gas revenue
Right.
that's coming in. So I think everybody that I've seen and heard is kind of, they don't know where to land on it, and I'm just landing that it's gonna hold steady.
Okay. And then as far as just the numbers, I mean, without having it broken down, are we seeing marijuana's dropping and liquor's going up or something to that effect? Or like, Yeah,
I
or
looked
vice
at
versa,
that,
like,
and
what's-
it's all over the map. In 2021, the liquor was very high, which has come down a lot over that time. Part of that, I think, is due to the pandemic.
COVID, you were home and it was easy. I got it, yeah.
There's kind of there's different levers. We're finding that cigarette tax is going down.
Yeah.
Marijuana tax is going up. But as a whole, it's kind of holding steady.
Okay.
But the different levers is one goes, another one goes up, another one goes down.
That was my question there. Thanks.
My question was just if holding the line on gas tax was actually being too generous in forecasting with the EV market changing over the next couple of years?
I'm aware of that, and that was a concern I had, but I didn't, because we're so tight this year, I didn't want to bring it down significantly in this biennium. It's still consistent with what it's been in 23 and 24, so we haven't seen a significant drop in it, but at some point it's gonna fall.
Unless the legislature takes action to increase it, which it
Outside of
has
our
been, has happened in the past and could happen. And Judy, helpfully, is reminding me that, again, I think the specific discussion on gas tax is also not something, we can discuss it, but as this part of public hearing, this is supposed to be specifically about accepting the state revenue sharing portion.
Yes.
Thanks for your patience, guys.
So moving on. This is the part of the agenda during which the committee will hear community member statements regarding the proposed state shared revenues. Those wishing to speak, please submit a comment card if in person at City Hall, email finance at milwaukieoregon.gov, or raise your hand in Zoom. We have nobody on Zoom, right?
No one.
Okay, so if you would like the city to follow up, please submit your contact information to finance@milwaukeeoregon.gov. As the committee has other business items on the agenda this morning, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. I'm going to skip all the rest of that since we don't have any speakers. Have we received any correspondence? Nope.
We have not.
Okay. Then, does the staff have anything to add which specifically addresses, I think everybody's had their questions answered. We don't have to worry about that. Any member of the committee have any additional questions? Nope.
Nobody
Okay.
online.
If there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public testimony part of the state shared revenue hearing.
I motion to close the public hearing portion of the state revenue sharing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public testimony of the state shared revenues. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any in favor? Any opposed say no. Okay, the motion passes. So are there any other items the committee would like to discuss? We've been pretty thorough, as far as I can tell. Okay, as a reminder, we will continue the budget hearing on May 4th, starting at 9 a.m. in person at City Hall. The city's YouTube channel, Comcast Cable Channel 30 in city limits, or via Zoom. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Oh, we need to vote what?
On the
We
state.
need to vote to accept the state's revenue. sharing.
Okay. I didn't hit the. Okay, going back to the state revenue sharing portion, hearing. I will entertain a motion to approve and recommend the state shared revenues to city council.
Leslie, can you hold on one second? Did we vote to close the hearing on state revenue?
Yeah, we
Okay, I
did.
We
think
did
you-
vote to
I
close.
think you will need to reopen the hearing. and
Oh,
then vote
okay,
to accept.
okay.
Our apologies.
So I am reopening the hearing on the state revenue sharing, a portion of the city budget. And, I am now entertaining a motion from the committee to approve and recommend the state revenue sharing to the city council.
So moved.
A second?
This is to accept the
Oh,
revenue sharing, is that right? I just want to make sure, do we need to be specific with some language that we're doing this, or is this good enough?
It says to approve and recommend, so
Okay, is that
that's,
what-
I
okay.
think that's what I'm supposed to do.
Motion to approve and recommend.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The approval and recommendation passes. And now, yes, right. It's been moved and seconded to approve and recommend. So I will now Uh, As a,
There's just not a closing section.
there is not a closing section. Okay, so now that that section has been closed, does the committee have any other questions? Is that right?
Do you need a motion to close?
Do I need a motion
I
to
think we need a
close?
motion to close the public hearing on accepting the state revenue sharing.
Okay,
Okay.
I move to close the public hearing portion of the state revenue sharing acceptance.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Now, are there any other items the committee would like to discuss? No. I already read the reminder. It's been moved, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second? Yeah, go ahead, David.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.